Good morning, Mr. Santos. Do you believe that Europe can grow itself out of its current problems?
I think, first of all, Europe needs to establish, how to grow itself out of its problems. And of course, the problem that we have is one solution doesn't always fit all. And this has been the rhetoric that we've heard time and time again through the debates about whether to invest in growth or to cut budgets, to try and bring about austerity, to try and bring in those budgets and overspending. And we all know what the impact on growth has been of that kind of policy over the last few years. Can Europe grow itself out of its problems? Well, it depends what kind of growth Europe is seeking to achieve. I was saying in my panels earlier today that often I think, well, if I had a penny for every time somebody talked about the crisis or the Great Recession, I'd be a rich person rather than a humble business journalist by now, because it has been more than 8 years since that crisis took place, and the growth has been anemic at best, probably just bumping along the bottom for many major economies. So I think what Europe really needs to do is assess what kind of growth it needs. Does it want fast growth? Does it want sustainable growth? Does it want inclusive growth that all people of all age spectra can actually participate in? And then they need to think about the right policy mix that works for all of the individual stakeholders that are involved. And I think this is particularly pertinent as a topic at the moment, because with the absence of growth, what we're seeing in the political world is populist rhetoric is taking hold wherever you are in the world. It leaves the door open to all sorts of unpalatable sides of policy that perhaps could be avoided if we had a bit more growth, and of course that growth translates into jobs.
With the upcoming Brexit vote, do you think that's a consequence of the lack of growth in Europe or in Britain?
Now, I'm going to stop you for a second there, because in your question you said something that was very interesting, and I think sometimes we lapse into journalese a little bit as well in the media space. You called it the Brexit vote. Well, technically, in theory, it's a referendum on the UK's position on membership of the European Union. And calling it a Brexit vote almost implies that, well, there will be a Brexit. Who knows whether or not there will be? There's still around about 6 weeks to go of voting. I don't think it's a consequence of low growth. In fact, if you take a look at the UK's growth trajectory, the UK has repeatedly been one of the strongest growing members of clubs like the G7. It's been repeatedly applauded by various international bodies like the IMF and the World Bank for how the UK has decided to handle its recovery. It's been stronger than many other Eurozone countries. But on the other hand, there are weaknesses in the system, aren't there? There are weaknesses that could be highlighted if the UK decides to leave the European Union. For instance, the UK relies on a very high current account deficit. It has its own currency, the pound, which has helped it to stay independent of problems inside the Eurozone, but on the other hand, leaves it open to weaknesses if it does decide to leave the single currency area. And there's a lot of economic statistics there that argue against leaving a bloc of 500 million customers.
With the media being overflooded with news from the internet, how does CNN, and especially your particular field, remain relevant?
I think all media organisations are facing a really interesting juncture. If anything, it's probably akin to the last wave of innovation in our business. And by the way, the topic here being growth and how to get growth, well, we all know innovation is one of the ways that you generate growth in a low growth environment. And this is exactly the type of predicament and paradigm that the UK and international media space is facing these days. The last time we saw it in my career was probably when we had the dot-com bubble. It was probably when many media organisations started up websites. We had the big transition to online news versus print news, TV news, traditional media. Everybody had called the death knell for all that didn't happen. Thank goodness, because I'm still employed. When it comes to the future, though, of media organisations, all of them, one of the interesting things that we're doing at CNN is, and we're doing on the business side, which is what I represent, CNN Money, is we have a particular brand that allows us to incorporate all of the individual media that people consume their news on in one. So we're talking about mobile, online, digital, and also on TV. And we have this great cross-platform exercise with CNN Money. I'm the Europe editor of CNN Money. My show is CNN Money View. And we're able to incorporate all of those different media to deliver the news to people on the move, whenever they want, wherever they want. And it's also something that we have to remember that's very important, is that the more we digitize our news, the more we have immediate feedback on what is relevant to our viewers and our readers, what they want to read, what they want to see. We're able to see it on digital news very quickly and respond to that and generate stories that are the most read, partly because it responds to the interest of what people want. So I think it's a very exciting time for CNN, for all organisations in this space.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos.
You're welcome.
Thank you.